O'Reilly. You need parts? O'Reilly Auto Parts has parts. Need them fast? We've got fast. No matter what you need, we have thousands of professional parts people doing their part to make sure you have it. Product availability. Just one part that makes O'Reilly stand apart. The professional parts people. O'Reilly Auto Parts.
There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
46% of Americans expect to leave behind financial obligations when they pass away. So it's crucial to make sure your family is financially protected. Policy Genius helps you find the right life insurance coverage by comparing options from America's top insurers with help from licensed, award-winning agents. Secure your financial future with Policy Genius. Head to policygenius.com to get free life insurance quotes in just a few clicks. That's policygenius.com.
Welcome back to Gear Talk, everyone. Jordan here, and I've got Giannis with me.
What up?
Dude, what's new?
What is new? It's not new. It's the same old, which is a lot of snow here in Montana. Just when we thought we had a lot of snow, we got 2+ feet on top of it, and now people are talking like this is the most snow they've ever seen in places, which, I don't know. I'm not quite believing it, because if you go by snow totals at the local ski resort up at Bridger, it's like 230 inches. And I think that closer to 300 inches is when it gets, like, when people are like, oh, that's a big snow year. So I have a feeling it's a result of having multiple poor winters, low snowpacks, and then we come to a normal one, and everybody's like, oh my God, a lot of snow, and it's cold. Even Steve Ranella was telling me yesterday, he's like, there's so much snow that my snowmobiles are snowed in. I can't even get them out. But yeah, I hunted lions not yesterday, but the 2 days prior to that, which again, when I say hunt lions, it means I'm out hiking, snowmobiling, driving a truck, looking for lion tracks. Most of the time it has nothing to do with the lions themselves physically. But I hunted with Jason Red, who owns Timber Ninja Outdoors, makes climbing sticks, saddles, really cool high-end stuff for the whitetail world. He came out because he had never been to Montana, had never done the mountain lion hound hunting thing. So I said, yeah, come on out and I'll take you on some hikes. The snow was so deep the first morning, I got the sled out to go just do a couple mile check up and down a drainage. And I could ride the road when it was flat. And as soon as the trail, when it went from like a Forest Service road to a trail, and there was a little bit of pitch, my poor little Ski-Doo Tundra just bogged down and I couldn't go. Luckily, it had just enough where I could reverse, make it forward, reverse, make it forward, and eventually was able to spin a donut, get turned around, and get back on my track and make it out of there. But it's literally too deep for my own snowmobile to go. So then we took to hiking. We hiked 8 miles-ish each day. Even in snowshoes, we were knee deep. If you put your hiking pole just down into the snowpack, a lot of places you could hold the end of the ski pole for my height and push your hand all the way down in, and your hand would just disappear in the snow. Like walking a trail that was packed out. The trail was like the edge of the upper snow is at Mingus's, the top of his head. And he's a tall dog. He can put his head on his chin on your kitchen counter. That gives you an idea of how deep the snow is around here. So anyway, still line hunting, still looking. But yeah, it is what it is. It's snowy. Soon here, though, with springtime temperatures, the snow is going to settle and it'll become travelable where you can hike on top of it. And not only will I be able to hike on top of it, but hopefully the lions will too, which will make them move. And then I'll cut a track. So I'm going to try again this weekend one day and cross my fingers.
Nice.
Yeah. What about you?
Yeah. We I thought that spring was here, and it snowed about 5 inches last night. It was 60 degrees yesterday, and it was like hot, and yeah, woke up this morning. We've got our first turkey clients in, and I took them out this morning as it was basically Christmas, and they're like, "This is going to be an interesting morning of turkey hunting," and I said, "Yep, it is." I would recommend heaters for the blinds, but they didn't end up going that route. So we'll see how that goes this morning.
So you've got hunters out right now as you're recording this podcast. You dropped them off this morning and they're sitting blinds over some decoys, I guess.
Yeah. Yep. I think they brought their own decoys and they're super experienced. So I could just kind of scout out the birds beforehand and set up some blinds as good starting points. And then they said that they brought all their own decoys and they're like, if it stops snowing, we'll probably put some decoys out. But if it doesn't, they're in a good enough spot that they might have some turkeys just stroll through. But it's been interesting. I haven't really heard turkeys. Like there were some hens talking last night. I haven't really heard much for goblin yet, and nor have I seen any strutters yet. So I don't know. It's a goofy year, but we have 5 inches of snow right now. It's supposed to be 60 degrees tomorrow. So average spring.
Nice muddy mess.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've killed several birds in 1 to 6 inches of snow in Nebraska. It's not snow in Nebraska is not only reserved for late March. You can easily get that well into April as well. But it is what it is.
Yeah.
All right. One other thing I want to mention, because I feel like I've been reading it in the comments a little bit. People commenting on Instagram when I was telling them to go listen to our last episode about knife sharpening, which is a great informative episode. I got a lot of positive feedback on that too, that a lot of people learned things that they didn't know. And maybe it's, I'm at a loss for words. It's got them excited to try sharpening their own knives. Or
I'm one of them. After that podcast, and then I got like the field sharpener, and I took a couple of knives, and man, once you start doing it and like get into it, I don't want to say it's fun, but it's like pretty rewarding doing your own stuff, which I have always just avoided in the past.
Yeah, it forces you to slow down. It's kind of a meditation therapeutic session. Just slow down, sharpen a knife. But yeah, once you get the skill, you really feel proud of yourself. And it's like, all right, yeah, I made this thing sharp. And especially when you get that thing really sharp and then you put it to work, I think, it's like a proud dad moment. You're like, all right, I did it. Moving on. But what I was going to say, my point to this that got me thinking about it was that some people feel like I don't know if it's just this podcast or just in general with Meat Eater, we're just always trying to sell you something. And with Jordan and I, when we want to do this podcast, it's not about that. It's about educating everyone about gear, including ourselves. There's a lot. That's why we have experts on. Like today, we've got Taylor Chamberlin on, who has killed truckloads more deer than I have with a bow and arrow. And we're going to talk to him about broadheads, because I don't know if there's anybody else possibly living alive in this country that's done it more and seen more arrows go through deer. I'm sure there is. But anyways, I want to make the point that if you are spending money on gear and it's keeping you from getting outside and going hunting, you're doing it backwards. Getting out and doing it should always be the number one goal. And I don't want to sell you something or tell you to go buy something that ever keeps you from going out and hunting. So if you need gas money, truck money, whatever it is, the basics, don't buy new gear. You can always make it work somehow if you want it bad enough. Now, when you do decide that you need a new soft shell or a new pair of boots, hopefully by what you've learned on the Gear Talk podcast, you'll be more informed and be able to make a better decision, be able to ask better questions to the manufacturer or to the salesperson at the store you go to about the specific gear you're looking at and buying, and you'll end up getting the better product or the product that better suits you, and you'll end up having better experiences. So, yeah, I don't know. That's not like a PSA. What is that? It's just like, it's my statement.
Yeah, it's a statement. And something too, I think people got to keep in mind is like some of these people that we're getting on to talk about things, it's going to be really hard to find somebody that's around, you know, X gear thing all the time if they don't have a company of their own or if they don't work for another company. Like, you know, we didn't get Steve on just to say that work sharpeners are the best. We just talked about sharpening knives, and that's pretty universal with all sharpeners. I mean, it really is. So I feel like we want to make a podcast that you can even reference to later when you're like, oh, hey, I need to go get a new knife sharpener, or I need to touch up some knives. Like, I'm just going to listen to this podcast real quick and just, you know, pick up a few things or whatever. So that's what I think.
Good. I'm glad we're aligned with our mission.
Yeah.
We have a new segment. Everybody likes segments. So we're just moving on. That was our catch-up recap segment. Now we're moving on to a segment called What's New? And because Jordan and I are doing this podcast, we've been in touch with a lot of companies that make gear and a lot of companies that want to send us gear to talk about. And maybe to possibly have on their gear experts, which is not always going to happen. But we get so much stuff, a lot of times I buy it. Like this thing that I'm going to talk about here now. I bought it because I wanted to check it out. A bunch of people had said, look, you need to check this out. But a lot of times, take for instance, Jordan and I both got a big box from Sawyer water filtration products. And I'm very gracious for that. I'm excited to check it all out, but didn't have to pay for it. Either way, all this to say is that just so that we can, when we see something that comes through our hands that's exciting, we can mention it, talk about it. Maybe we've used it, maybe we haven't used it, but it's I think, again, for the listener, it's a way to say, hey, this is something new. You might want to check it out. It looks interesting.
Put it on the radar.
Yeah, it looks interesting. I hadn't heard about it, or I had heard about it. This is a different way of doing it. Hopefully, if we check out the product, whether we like it or not, later, we'll probably talk about it in depth more. But so yeah, let's get on with what's new. What you got, Jordan?
Yeah. So. Many know I'm out in Nebraska on the ranch helping do calving stuff, and we've talked about it a little bit before. I've been calling coyotes, and mostly just for predator control for calves. And like we've had a little bit of issues. We had a coyote, we think, killed a calf, a healthy calf, and so I was like, you know, mostly for the most part, they were running around at night, like dogs were barking on the house. Like there were coyotes coming like literally like 50 yards from the house in the night. And it was kind of crazy. So I was like, I need a lot of times it's just me going out there, and it's really hard to try to shoot and hold a light at the same time, which just putting it out there, Nebraska is a state where you can use artificial light as long as it's not plugged into a vehicle or a boat, I believe it says. But I was like, I need something that attaches to my rifle. So I literally went to the store and I got I looked at a couple different lights. I looked at the Wicked lights, and then I looked at the Fox Pro light, and just doing a 5 minutes of research online in the store, I was like, Wicked lights seemed to be the way to go. So I got a Wicked lights A75IC Predator light, and that thing is like a torch. I have it on my cross. I mounted it to the side of the handguard on the cross.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's actually a remote control on and off that runs. I have it ran to the left side of the rifle, kind of back, like right above where the magazine attaches. It's just a little Velcro strip that sucks on there, and you have like a push button, like turns it on and off.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a rolling dial that will turn up the intensity and turn down the intensity. I shot a coyote at 250 yards with it the other day at like 1 a.m. So that was pretty much max of what it could do. But yeah.
Are you running just a regular light, or does it have a filter that makes it red or green or whatever?
Yeah, it has. I'm running just a regular light. That gets you the most distance. And I haven't seen it really mess with them too much. Like I'll pop a light on, usually just like a spotlight. I'll pop a light on and do a scan, and once I see them, I'll turn everything off, and then I'll like lay down or get in a position to shoot, kind of get everything ready, and then I'll pop the light on. And usually they're still right there. They don't even pay attention to it. But it does have a dial on the side, that model anyway, that rolls to green to red. I think it's green, red, and white, or just those three.
Oh, but you're just running white, and doesn't bother them.
No, I was, the first coyote I shot with it, I was probably 70 yards from him, maybe. And I popped the light on, and he didn't even look up. Like, didn't pay any attention to it.
Yeah, I think I've used one of those lights long time ago. Steve had one, but I remember it being a very solid, just seemingly well-made product. When I bought it and got it for Steve.
Sweet.
Something new that came across I don't know why it's so easy to say came across my desk. I rarely sit at my desk. My desk is just covered basically in piles of small gear. The big gear goes down to the gear shed, and then I have all this little stuff sitting on my desk. That's why I'm always at my kitchen table working. But I bought a Peaks headlamp. What is it called? It's called the Backcountry Duo headlamp. Bunch of people, after we had talked about headlamps on one of our earlier podcasts, quite a few folks said we should try this one out. So I bought it. Actually, interestingly enough, I didn't know, but made in Bozeman, or the company is out of Bozeman. I'm guessing that the product itself is made somewhere else, but very simple design. It's actually similar to what Steve used to rock. He might still use it, but I think it was a Surefire headlamp. But what I never liked about Steve's is it seemed heavy and bulky. This one is a little bit smaller, lighter, machined aluminum, seems super tough. I mean, honestly, I've only used it, 3-4 mornings probably. And that's been very light use, just jumping in and out of the truck, looking at tracks. But it's cool. One end of the sort of the battery compartment unscrews to give you access to the charging port. So once you're charged, you just screw it down and it completely seals it off, makes it waterproof and keeps the dust out of your charging port and all that kind of stuff. 2 lights, red and white, and you can go, like most headlamps, high, low. I don't think this one has a medium, but high, low. And it runs rechargeable, which I think for a lot of us, for a long time, it was scary to think about going rechargeable and going into the mountains for an extended period of time. But just with the luck that I've had with my Black Diamonds running, you got to be smart about it, right? You can't accidentally turn it on in your backpack. Then you're not going to have a headlamp anymore. But I've had plenty of week-long trips where one charge is doing me just fine. This one might not quite have the battery life of these smaller headlamps that we talked about, but what it does have is its brightest setting is quite a bit brighter than that. I can't remember the name of the Black Diamond that I was using, but it's not quite spotlight, but it's bright. It's out there. So anyways, it's new. I like it. I'm digging it so far. Seems tough, very simple to use. Check it out. I think it's
Is it only rechargeable?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, like no option for double A's, like pulling a.
No, it looks like a oversized double A, but long,
Gotcha.
right? Not oversized like a C or a D, but it's a little bit fatter than a double A, a little bit longer. I'm guessing you can probably buy a second battery from them and just have it charged up and pop it in there if you wanted to have that backup. But
yeah, what's the lumens on it?
Max output is 1,000 lumen. Range is 490 feet. Well over 100 yards. Almost 150.
Yeah. I think that we should get somebody on to talk about lights and lumens and outputs and all that stuff that is confusing.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, it weighs in at it says 2.65 ounces. That excludes the battery. So I don't know. I'm guessing it's 3.5, which I was looking at some weights, some other headlamps. It's that 3 to 4 ounce range is pretty common for headlamps. And again, if you want if you want 100 yard range with your headlamp, it's gonna have to be a little bit on the heavier side. Like I've got that little bitty Petzl E-light as a backup in my little kit in my pack. Sure,
it's like a foot.
Yeah, it's not that bad, but it's probably not much past 10 or 15 feet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. But it serves its purpose as a extremely lightweight backup battery, and I've had it come in handy. I've never left my headlamp behind, but I've had twice where it's gotten dark and we're getting ready for the hike out. And on a trail, it's never that big of a deal. You can make it down a trail with no headlamp. But if you're bushwhacking down some nasty creek bottom, no fun without a headlamp. And I've had some buddies that were like, yeah, no headlamp. I'm like, oh, here's my little Petzl E-light. And it's just enough to illuminate, their future so that they don't get a staub stuck in their leg.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. I've looked at that thing a bit and have been wanting to pull the trigger on one. I just haven't done it yet. So it's good to know you like it.
Cool.
All right. We'll take just a quick breather and we'll be back with Taylor Chamberlin.
O'Reilly Auto Parts are in the business of keeping your car on the road. O'Reilly Auto Parts offer friendly, helpful service and the parts knowledge you need for all your maintenance and repairs. If you're confused about what part you need, like what wipers are going to be the best, what replacement headlights are going to be the best, go into O'Reilly and talk to the people that work there because they're great and they're super friendly and they'll get you squared away where you walk out knowing you got the right thing. They've got thousands of parts and accessories in stock, either in-store or online, so you never have to worry if you're in a jam. Do you need your windshield wipers replaced? You need a brake light fixed? You need some quick service? They'll help you find the right part or point you to the nearest local repair shop for help. The professional parts people at O'Reilly Auto Parts are your one-stop shop for all things auto do-it-yourself, and you can find what you need in-store or online. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today or visit us at O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. That's O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land. Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild. But searching for property can be a maze. That's where Land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to Land.com today to turn one day into today, because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth.
Okay, Taylor Chamberlin. Taylor hunts suburban deer around Washington, D.C., around somewhere between 150 and over 200 days annually in the last 15 years. He's co-host of the Hang and Hunt podcast, so you can go a deeper dive on what he's got going on by listening to that podcast. If you want to see sort of how Taylor's hunts go, and Taylor, you can tell me if First Light did a good rendition of how your hunting goes there. But there's First Light made an episode for their YouTube channel called In City Limits. It's all about how Taylor goes around knocking on doors to get permission on 1 to 3 acre properties and hunting people's backyards. I just rewatched it last night. It's entertaining, and it's way, way different than a lot of us look at whitetail deer hunting. So the reason we have Taylor on today is because Taylor told me that his success rate is around 35%. So if you do the math of 15 years of hunting, 150 to 200 days a year, that equals a boatload of deer. I'm not even going to say the number. Do the math at home. It's not that hard, but it's a lot. And that's why I feel like he's a great person to talk to us about broadheads, because I think for me personally, I don't know of anybody else personally that I've met that's probably put more arrows through deer specifically. I've met some people that have killed a lot of elk, but not these kind of numbers. I'm talking, 50 to maybe 100 elk with a bow, but not these kind of numbers of deer. So we're going to talk specifically broadheads with Taylor, talk to him about what he's seen over the years, the different styles, different types, the results of all of them, and going from there. So, Taylor, first, I want to set the stage a little bit so that when people listening, they'll have some context around why we're talking to you about this. But tell me first, how are you able to hunt 200 days in a year? Like, it just, even as a guide, I felt like I rarely made 200 days a year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm nothing short of addicted and terribly obsessed with hunting whitetail with a bow. And I am very thankful that I have a wife that does not like me to be in the house, because I'm often gone hunting whitetail, around our house in the suburbs of DC. So the real reason and what allows me to hunt year round. So here in the Northern Virginia, DC area, we have a year round deer season. And the reason for that is our carrying capacity should be in the 10 to 12 deer per square mile range. Mm-hmm. They are so overpopulated, they can't even quantify how overpopulated the deer are, because when they do a thermal imaging or they fly with the white hot stuff, it just looks like somebody kicked the anthill. The best guess for our deer population right now is 420 to 425 deer per square mile, and their pockets that they estimate over 600. So, like, anybody who's seen any of my content, for people that haven't, it's not uncommon to sit in a tree, especially this time of year when we're starting to get a little bit of spring green up right now, but from January 1st through March 1st, you can see 40, 50, 60 deer in a hunt, because they're literally, they're like rats on stilts around here, is actually what a homeowner called them one time. That really stuck with me. But they're just incredibly overpopulated. They have nothing to eat. They've eaten themselves out of house and home, and it's a huge, huge problem here. So What I'm fortunately able to do is hunt them with a bow and arrow and use this overabundant resource to help provide for people in need, which we also have a lot of here in the DC area. So we're able to feed the homeless with them, take them to food banks, get them to churches, and have that food kind of disseminate out into the world or this little area of our community and help people out. So it's really a good use for the overabundance of them. But with hunting them year round comes a lot of responsibility, and that's kind of what we're going to get into with the broadheads. But some of the parcels that I'm hunting are as small as a quarter acre. I have properties that are very near some 3-letter government buildings that you guys have definitely heard about that I do not want a deer to cross into. I don't want it to get near the fence or the parking lot. The last thing I need is to show up in my camo and try and explain to somebody who is not familiar with hunting what the heck I'm coming out of the woods doing. So shot placement and your equipment is, I can't imagine a place that it's more critical than where I'm hunting.
But imagine if the property you're hunting is a quarter acre, you've got to be thinking ahead and getting permission on the neighboring properties so that if something doesn't happen just by plan, the deer does, hop into the neighbor's backyard, that you've already figured that out. No?
Oh yeah. Yeah. A quarter acre spot. There's almost zero chance that deer is expiring on that property. I mean, you can get kind of in the corner, and I get, shot placement is really key, right? If you, we can go down into this rabbit hole, but if you can hit them tight and kind of top of the heart and right behind that crease of the shoulder to where they're snow plowing, their chest will actually work like an air brake, and they'll only go about 15, 20 yards, as opposed to like a true heart shot deer whose lungs are still functioning. That deer might go 100, 125 yards. So every little inch counts in shot placement. But to answer your question, yes, you need to get permission or think about which way the deer are going to go. But that's a double-edged sword. So you also have to factor into what I'm doing here in the suburbs, as people are very polarized on the idea of hunting. Some people that have lived here for a while understand that the deer are overpopulated and they need to go. But the majority of people that I talk to, and I'm not trying to generalize, it's just the fact of the matter, DC is a highly transient area, and not a lot of people have been exposed to hunting. And even if they have been exposed to hunting in some manner, their idea of hunting is much different than us as hunters portray ourselves and make a point to do, right? I mean, we're all knowledgeable and upstanding hunters. That's not exactly the kind of feeling that a lot of homeowners have around hunting that haven't been exposed to it. So you have to be careful when you get permission. I mean, first and foremost, it's so difficult to get permission. Once you get it, if you know the deer is going to run one way, you need to have that discussion either with that homeowner or the owner of that property. But also, the last thing you want is to go over there and have that person freak out, and now you have two neighbors that are going at it. There's pretty much zero chance you're going to keep permission in the event of that happening. So you have to be kind of cognizant of the risk you're taking by preemptively asking for track and retrieve is what I call it, permission. But most people don't want a dead deer on their property. Only once in my life have I had somebody tell me no, that I wasn't allowed to recover a deer on their property, which was a very interesting situation to say the least. So, yeah.
Okay, to continue painting the picture, I want to talk about. So again, later when we're talking about the performance of all these different types of broadheads, people can understand how you were applying these broadheads and what the situation was like. So we know you're suburban DC. You're in a tree, I'm guessing, all the time or most of the time. So you're shooting from an angle downwards.
I'm always elevated. I'm kind of lazy by nature. So if there's a playground set or something that's available or a deck, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to go climb a tree, but I'm never not hunting from or not shooting from an elevated position.
Okay.
Tree forts work great.
Yeah, because the deer are used to having kids and whoever hanging out in a tree fort, right? So it's not out of place. What's the average shot distance?
I will not shoot over 20 yards. Shot placement accuracy is 100% the most important thing. Sometimes I mentor a lot of new urban hunters that are getting into this. Mm-hmm. And I tell them that sometimes the best shot you can take is not taking a shot at all, because the downside for a wounded animal in a highly populated neighborhood or a deer ending up in a pool or whatever is way worse than harvesting that animal. So I will not take a shot over 20 yards. The average shot, like my perfect shot, is anywhere from like 12 to 16 yards. I would say that 95% of the deer that I've harvested in my life have been between 12 and 15 yards.
Okay.
Nice. Where shot placement wise, where are you looking to shoot one? I know you just talked about like the act of air brake. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Absolutely. I'm a very visual person, so everybody's different, but I think of a deer's front two legs as holding up a balloon. So think of like chopsticks that are carrying around like a kid's soccer ball, right? And that 3D image has always worked for me depending on how that animal is quartering. So animals quartering to you, horrible shot. Do not recommend it. You guys have spent a ton of time in the woods or in the field rather with guiding. I'm sure you've seen every shot in the world. A lot of people tend to lose their mettle with an animal facing towards them, and they inherently want to still aim at the crease, and you just end up with like very little bit of one lung liver shot. That's not what we want. So if you think of those legs kind of holding up the ball as that critter is walking around, that helps me visualize where the armor plating is basically on an animal, which is the shoulder blades, the front breastbone. If you think of the way our anatomy is, it's very similar to a deer. It's just we're vertical. So I think of that little balloon or that little soccer ball walking around, and I just try to pop that ball. And I've tried a lot of different kind of methodologies for shot aiming, whether it's aim for the crease or aim for the exit. Aiming for the exit works really well, but for me, just kind of like threading an arrow through that balloon it works with my head. So in a sense, I'm aiming for the exit, but that always helps with that animal, especially when they're quartered away. I find it really helps when if that front leg is back when they're feeding, I can still see where those vitals are and put it through there. But I really like to be tight into that soccer ball, which is very tight behind the leg. So if you look at the anatomy of a deer, the shoulder comes down and then comes back, and there's a little V there, which is right in front of the crease. If you hit them right there, all the ligaments for their legs are kind of in that area, and their legs will not work. So a lot of people think they're shooting through the shoulder. You're actually not shooting through the shoulder. You're below the shoulder bone. That scapula sits at kind of a 45-degree angle. By coming
it actually kind of goes forward, and then the humerus sort of comes back towards what I would call the elbow, and then from the elbow, the leg goes straight down.
Correct. And so it gives the appearance of it being completely vertical, which in my Neanderthal brain, I see as chopsticks holding up a little balloon. But in reality, by putting it right through there, you're cutting through a lot of connective tissue that they use to operate their legs. And so if I'm hunting, especially on a quarter-acre spot, and mind you, this is all incredibly specific for inside 20 yards. I'm 6'3". I have a 70-pound draw weight, and I'm shooting a 30.5-inch draw. So 30.25 is my actual draw length. So this is not, the same for if my wife were to be a hunter. her setup would be very different, and I maybe would even tell her to aim potentially a little further back than this. But for me specifically, I love hitting them right in that little V where that bone has gotten out of the way. Their legs will not work, and they will just run on their chest for about 10 to 12 yards and just expire. So that's a textbook perfect shot for me, broadside.
So
if that animal is quartered away slightly, sorry to cut you off, it's harder to put it in that pocket and still have a perfect shot. I do not like a pinwheeled heart. Like, you know, those pictures you see online of everybody holding up the heart that's got the perfect shot through it. I find that a heart shot deer, especially low heart shot, or if you nick the top of the heart in the front, people will say, oh, I think the deer get an adrenaline dump or something. I don't know if that's true, as much as their lungs are still functioning, and therefore their muscles are still able to function. And so they're dead on their feet. But I've seen deer run 120, 130 yards, perfect blood trail out both sides, just because their lungs were able to function instead of them being able to expire faster. And that, for me, is a horrible situation, because now I have more cleanup duty and a deer that's 3 properties over, that is now a problem.
Right. For most of us, we'd be like, sweet, he ran 100 yards and died. Yeah. And you're like, oh no.
Exactly. I'm watching it from the tree, like, go down, go down, go down, go down. Uh-oh. And then it's
right. Even though you saw, you got to see the deer fall down, which is the best feeling ever, in my opinion, is when you shoot an arrow and you actually get to see the critter fall over. I mean, the relief that sets over me is incredible. But for you, if it doesn't happen in 15 yards, your night just got a little bit longer. But tell me, so I know kind of where you're aiming and what roughly where you want the arrow to go, but tell me exactly a perfect shot. What would the broadhead be cutting inside the deer? Like what does a perfect shot look like inside the deer?
A absolute perfect shot would be cutting the blood vessels, like the main arteries that are coming off the top part of that heart, and just smashing where they connect to the bottom of the lungs there, and getting all that lung. So what that's going to create is like instant. I mean, first off, that diaphragm is popped. Hopefully that deer was just slightly quartered away, like 2 degrees. So it's smashed through that V that we talked about with where the scapula and the leg bone come back. It's taking out those top arteries coming off the heart. It's not cutting the heart, though, to be super specific. And it's putting a giant hole in the lungs to where they're deflated and filled with blood, and they're not going to function. That deer goes 12 yards, maybe 20.
I like it.
Nice.
Pass through.
I also like to eat the heart. So the heart, I don't want to like smash up, because I want to be able to fry it perfectly when I get home. I'm very addicted to deer hunting, but I'm also not a small person, and I really like eating venison. So it's nice to have.
What's your method for frying heart?
Butter, baby. Butter and a little bit of onions.
Interesting. No, are you breading it at all?
No, I fry it in butter.
Just straight up butter, salt and pepper.
Caveman. Yeah, I have what's the salt SPG from a company called Kinder's. It's pretty easy to find here. It's in like the rub aisle. It's just salt, pepper, and garlic, and that with some butter, a little bit of onion. Hard to beat.
Low heat or more of a sear?
More of like a sear fry.
Okay, I know we're getting into the weeds on frying heart here, but one other question is how do you clean it up? Because some people, Steve Ranella, he basically just cuts the top off of it, discards that, and then just goes down cutting slices. If you were cutting across an apple to make the cute little star in the middle, he'll just go down the heart like that, cut slices right into the pan. I personally like to trim the whole outside, then open it up like a green pepper and trim any funky looking stuff on the inside. Where do you land on that?
That's exactly how I am. I trim all my stuff, like very detailed trimming. I don't know. I find that it tastes way better, in my opinion, and it's probably placebo effect. But if I trim it all up, I just think that tastes like a almost completely different cut of meat than it does when you just, go to Steve's method of just whacking it and throwing it in there. The heart that you cooked in Idaho, which I think was Jordan's
This is
caribou
my
heart,
caribou heart. Yeah.
that was some of the best heart I've ever had. That heart tasted completely different than whitetail heart from the burbs eating shrubbery and
Flowers.
grass. Yeah.
Huh. That's interesting.
The venison here tastes completely different also while we get down that rabbit hole, but I think it's because of what they're eating. I mean, they're basically living off the equivalent of deer Taco Bell compared to deer that live in, an area with ag.
Mm-hmm.
Right. A lot of herbicides, pesticides. Right. Is that what you're saying? That just the stuff is so manicured?
Right. Part of what creates the deer problem that we have here in the suburbs is the fact that we've taken, relatively poor habitat for deer in a very aging mixed hardwood forest, which is like pretty much all this area is. And we've replaced it with manicured lawns and landscaping and all this stuff that the deer can thrive on. So now they just eat hostas and grass and, stuff that is I don't know how that falls on the quality spectrum for them, but it's allowing them to reproduce and thrive here, but it's not the best quality food, is my understanding. So I think that's kind of what leads to a lower quality venison.
It'd be interesting to try to figure that out. If there's a way to like quantify it,
like the nutrients in hostas and daffodils versus like corn and soy. Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, when I shoot a deer in Kansas, let's say, or like a mule deer, mule deer doesn't count because it's a different species. But when I shoot a whitetail in Kansas, that venison tastes completely different than one in Ohio or one here from a backyard.
Interesting. I always have a hard time. My brother-in-law gives me some crap a little bit because my grind bags will just say grind, and there could be elk in there, mule deer, pronghorn, whatever I've killed that year. It all gets ground usually at the same time. It all gets made into some sausage, but I don't have packages labeled elk burger, antelope burger. It's just all the same. And I'm like, I can't, once it's in a burger, I can't tell, but he feels like he can really tell, and everything, all the animals have to stay separate. But anyways, all right, we got to get to broadheads here eventually. But a couple other setup questions. I'm glad that you mentioned your draw weight, your length, draw length. Tell me too, what's how heavy? I don't want to quite get to the broadheads yet. Let's do this one first. Are you looking for a pass through? Why or why not?
Yeah, I want two holes.
You want two holes?
I specifically want a hole, that exit hole being lower to the ground creates a much easier blood trail to find and follow. So a lot of the hunts that I'm doing, and this is managing a deer herd. These are cull hunts.
Yep.
I'm not shooting just one deer and getting down unless I hear a splash or some tires slam and somebody's screaming. Generally I'm hunting does, and if I'm in a pocket where there are does present, generally another family group is going to come through, and so I'm able to maximize my efficiency by shooting a couple more. So for me, I might shoot 2-3 deer in a sit. I stop shooting at 4 because I've found after 4 the blood trails really cross and you start following your same path in the woods. It's kind of funny how easy, I mean, you're in a backyard, you can see landmarks, but when you're looking down following blood, I can't tell you how many times you'll pick your head up and you're like, oh, I've already been here, and you have to go back around. It's very weird, and also those deer will often run on the same trail and then they'll split off. So it really gets mixed in, but I stopped shooting at 4. I found that after 4, it really turns helter skelter. But I want that pass through. I want to find my arrow immediately. I use a lot of white on my arrows so I can quickly look at them and verify that what the image that is burned in my head of what I saw at the shot and saw what happened, I'm now verifying, so there's not, gut matter or anything on the arrow. Although I will caution people, I can't tell you how many times I've shot a deer like perfectly, watched it run and expire, and if it's early in the season, maybe got some of that diaphragm and there'll be like some green bile on my arrow, and I'm like, how is that possibly on there? Well, it's just kind of exiting through, especially if it's a hard quartered away deer and that arrow is exiting kind of in front of that offside shoulder. You can catch diaphragm and get gut, bile, whatever on there. So don't always go with what's on the arrow, but the arrow is a phenomenal indicator of what happened, and I'm a huge advocate for all white. Plus, white is one of the rarest colors, except for you, Yanni, because I think you said it snowed a ton there. But white is very rare in the woods, so it's normally very easy to find white. Whereas, like, I used to run blaze orange stuff on all my my fletchings and wraps. That can be surprisingly hard to find, especially in fall foliage. So I want to pass through. I want that lower hole, and I really want white everything so I can find my arrow, identify what's on it, and follow that blood trail from there.
Yeah, I was just going to say wraps can be really nice if you have them in white, because it just gives you more surface area for that blood to get on or whatever it is. Because sometimes, like on fletchings, it's hard to tell sometimes because they're just not that big. But yeah, the white wrap is good. Absolutely.
Yeah, white is key. I mean, all of my arrows are like all white. They look like Pablo Escobar's arrows. They're just like, I have like an 8-inch white wrap with veins on them. White's my friend in the woods.
Yeah, the only reason I run one vein that's not white is because I like to have a cock vein so that if I'm having to do a quick, a lot of times elk hunting, you're just hiking along and all of a sudden, oh my gosh, there's a bull in the same trail that I'm walking down, and you go into panic mode, and it's nice to grab an arrow and know where, to align it properly on your string. Not that it has to be that way. Probably it's not going to make that much of a difference, but I like to have a cock vein. Plus, I go pink now, hot pink and 2 white, because my photographers have told me that when they're watching arrow flight on their screens, that those are the 2 colors that pop the best on their screen, white and pink. And so, since we often have the luxury of having a filmed shot hit, it's nice to have whatever fletching's popping the most so you can see exactly where you hit the most,
If you ran a 4 fletch, then you wouldn't have to worry about that cock vein.
My arrows are so heavy, I can't add another 3 grains because it's going to slow them down too much. I can't decide. You mentioned
you were shooting heavy arrows.
I can't decide how we should get into the weight of your broadheads and the weight of your arrows, because I feel like it could change based on the broadhead. Can you answer me that? Will it change? So, like, should we talk about broadheads, the weight of broadheads and arrows, as we talk about each specific broadhead, or can we do it generally now and then go into the broadheads?
Yeah, so I shoot generally the exact same weight. I shoot 125 grain head. The reason that I shoot 125 grain head is I want my full setup to be right around that 500 grain mark. I would much prefer like a 475, 450 if I could get there. But due to the draw length that I haven't found an arrow that I'm comfortable with the outsert system and really the overall quality of an arrow that I can get that light on. So for me, right in that 500 mark is perfect. I think that like anywhere from 450 to 500 is a good blend of speed, but still keeping that momentum and kinetic energy, which is obviously very important. I know that's a highly controversial topic at the present day, and some guys like this Ashby stuff and 800 grains, whatever. I've shot heavier arrows. I have not seen a decline in performance from a 650 grain arrow to a 500 grain arrow, I have seen an increase in performance in speed and less drop. So even though it's funny that I'm only shooting deer at 15 yards, let's say, I don't know why it matters to me, but I really like the idea of having a flatter trajectory with the same performance. It doesn't matter for the hunting application that I'm doing, but if, I go out west or whatever, I think it's a more efficient system. It's better blended. It's more versatile by having less drop. So 500 grains, 125 grains. The way I ended up with 125s was because I wanted a certain amount of front of center on my arrow, and that extra 25 grains over the 100 grain got me there. I could shoot heavier, but it's harder to find 150, 175, 250, whatever type grain heads. And so I wanted to stick with something where, like, if I fly into Duluth and I realize all my field points aren't there, I'm like, oh my God, I can go to Cabela's and go buy some 125s or something. I don't want to get into this like weird outlier broadhead weight or screw in point weight that I can't go like rapidly find somewhere.
It's a great point.
It's a great point. That's why I'm always telling people to keep shooting their 308s and 30-06s.
Yep.
Yeah, right. Same thing. If I go into, my elk hunt and all of a sudden TSA pulled my ammo out or something happened, I don't want to have to go find some like 28 Nosler hot load special round somewhere. I can just roll in and buy some 30-06 Hornadies and be ready to rock, right? So same concept for my hunting setup. So I try to find generally readily available products, and that's why I've stuck with the 125s. And if anybody wants some 100 grain broadheads, I have a literal pile here that I can't use anymore because I've switched over to the 125s.
All right, let's get into the broadheads then. We made a quick list, Jordan and I, because I didn't want to get into too much about actual specific broadheads and the companies that make them. We can say that for another day. I think we can break it down just into sort of general categories and tell me if you think this is too many categories or if we even need more. But we had like within the fixed blade category, you got to break it down, I think, to subcategories, which is fixed 2 blade, fixed 3 blade, fixed 4 blade. And then we even have in the 2 blade, you have double bevels and single bevels. Then we go to mechanicals, which I don't even know all the mechanicals enough. I think there's probably 10 subcategories for mechanicals. And then, of course, we also have the difference in tips. How do you think, Bess, as a person that has tried so many broadheads, how do you think is the best way to break it up?
I think that's very fair. And I think in order to assess those, you need to kind of have categories, performance categories, right? And so what I'm looking for in a broadhead, just that I'm using to analyze every head that I'm testing, trying, whatever, are a multitude of things. So I want accuracy in flight, right? I want to rely on the arrow hitting where my pin is when I'm executing a shot. Now, there is some human error in there. I like to think that I'm perfect, but I'm definitely not. My wife will tell you that. So, as long as I do my part, I want the head to fly properly. So flight characteristics, the noise of a broadhead, people don't often think about how loud different variations of heads are downrange. I do not want that critter to have any notice of what's incoming, right? So the noise, then also forgiveness is something that I think of, but not in the traditional sense of forgiveness from an accuracy standpoint. Yes, that's important, but forgiveness in shot placement. If I make a poor shot, I want the arrow or the broadhead, to bail me out. And so what I mean by that is the larger cutting diameter, the larger cutting surface is going to help me out. If I hit back, it's going to cut more stuff. It has a greater opportunity to hit that vein or, nick that femoral artery and result in an instant death. that's something that I often think about with heads, and we can get more into that when we start talking about the different categories of heads and also the blade profile on them, both in numbers and type. And then lastly, durability, right? I'm shooting a lot of deer and I need to be able to reuse them. A head that goes in the trash after I shoot a deer with it is trash for me. Like, I can't be spending what broadheads cost nowadays, even at a discount, or geez, frankly, even if they're free. I don't want to go through, 5 dozen, 8 dozen heads in a year. That just doesn't seem right to me. So those are kind of the categories that I'm applying to all these heads when I'm testing them.
Okay, a follow-up on that, though, Taylor, is if you're reusing broadheads, are you sharpening broadheads?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So you do sharpen your own broadheads after they've been used.
So I'm calling you guys from my man cave down here, my command center. And to my left, I have a pile of used broadheads. And so I basically wait until that pile gets a little too high for me, and I will sit here and watch TV and have a glass of water or bourbon or coffee, depending on what time of day it is, and just start sharpening away. So I try to have a couple boxes of broadheads at the ready that are sharpened and ready to go back in rotation.
Nice.
So I do a lot of sharpening. Yeah.
Okay, so we know the categories that you're rating each broadhead on, and I want to hear pros and cons about each one. Let's maybe do it this way. This might be a good way to just make it easier for us to follow along. Why don't, instead of starting with, say, the category just that we're picking, let's start with a category maybe that you started with, and then we can go through the categories as you sort of progress through them. Is that a good idea?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to attack it. So first and foremost, you're only going to get back from a broadhead what you put into your gear, right? And I think that goes with everything. Like, you can't say that your boots are crap if you haven't taken the time to condition them or break them in. Same thing with a broadhead or with a bow. If you haven't tuned a bow, you're not going to get any, the maximum performance out of it. That's like driving your car to a racetrack and trying to race it when it's not designed to do that. I'm fanatical about tuning my gear and having it perform as perfectly as it reasonably can. So for me, shooting a fixed blade head versus a mechanical head is not, it's a level playing field as far as the accuracy standpoint. A fixed blade head is going to hit generally where a mechanical head is going to hit for me, unless there's some like weird variability that specific fixed blade head is creating an issue in point of impact. So if you're not going to tune your bow, if you're going to just like grab your bow off the hanger on October 15th and go hunt with it, and you haven't touched it since last November, a fixed blade head might not be for you. Very often on these forums and stuff, you see like, oh, that head flies like crap, it performs like crap. I mean, frankly, any head generally put in the right place will perform. It's the shooter, either shot placement or your gear hasn't been broken down to operate correctly. So when I first started hunting, I taught myself how to hunt, and I bought some generic 3-blade heads from like Walmart. They did not fly well. I thought that it was the head that was not flying well. In reality, it was the Indian, not the arrow, and it was my lack of bow tuning and performance. So I quickly switched from fixed blades to mechanicals, which I think is what a lot of people do that don't put the time in to tune their bow. So do you just want to start with like fixed blades versus mechanicals, or do you want to go down my path of heads?
Yeah, I don't know if it has to be a fixed blades versus mechanicals, because I'd imagine that there are some pros to mechanicals. I'll be honest, I've never shot one. I've guided people that shot elk with mechanicals, but I've personally never shot one. So I just think however you want to do it, whatever makes sense in your mind, and to help keep us on track and to make it not too confusing, but just as long as we can sort of go over every group or every style category, however we want to say it, of broadhead, and sort of go through the pros and cons and talk about the results that you saw with each style. That's what I'm trying to get out of it. Jordan?
Okay.
Yeah, same.
So let's just go down both categories. So let's start with fixed blade heads, right?
Mm-hmm.
In my experience, with a fixed blade head, the pros are the penetration of them. So if you hit bone or something harder, you are less likely to have either a deflection or have your arrow stop abruptly. In that fixed blade category, you have 2 blades, 3 blades, and 4 blades, and then you have the 2 blade with a bleeder as like a hybrid.
Mm-hmm.
So in my experience, the smaller the cutting diameter, the worse the performance was for me. And the performance that I'm looking for is easy to follow blood trails and the fastest expiration of that critter possible. And so when I had smaller holes, especially the smaller slits versus chunks, so 2 blades versus 3 or 4 blades, the worse the performance was. So if you looked on a scale of fixed blade heads and then 0 being like the animal didn't die, which we all know isn't possible, all the way up to 10, like, oh my gosh, the animal took 2 steps and fell over. On that scale, 2 blade heads would be closer to the 1s and 2s of it, and going up until like 8 or 9 would be the larger 4 blade or 3 blade cutting heads. However, you end up with a little bit of, I guess, unintended consequences of shooting heads of that size are, they're a little louder in flight. You have 4 blades instead of 2 that are making noise in the air, and that 4 blades or 3 blades instead of 2 potentially can create less accurate broadhead flight. So if you're tuning your bow and you're out there and you're listening to this and you're thinking like, I don't know what head to get, you really need to play around with a couple different ones to try and figure out what matters most for you. And for me, in my hunting situation, with my draw weight, my draw length, I have no problem shooting a giant cut on contact fixed blade head. I prefer 4 blades, say that 10 times fast, because I want to put that giant chunk, that big, large cutting diameter through an animal.
But when you say 4 blades, because I think if I'm correct, the one you're shooting now, it's basically it's a 2 blade with bleeders, not 4 actual blades, right?
Correct. Yes. So the head that I'm shooting currently has a very large bleeder on it that's almost the same size as the actual blade. So it's an 1.25 inch and a quarter by 1.25 cutting diameter. So I'm almost getting a full 2.5 inch cut through an animal in cutting diameter, which is awesome. And if you look at the opposite side of the coin in expandables are great in the sense that they have a very low profile. When they hit, they open up, hopefully, and then they're making a big hole. My concerns with an expandable, just to be general and kind of like start this off in chapter 1, I guess, are that you don't know that they're going to open at all times. And so the potential for a lack of performance is very scary to me. I don't like relying on that equipment to perform. And then it takes a lot of energy out of your setup to create that opening. And so, add in the fact that if you hit bone with an expandable and your penetration is all but pretty much stopped, or the blades are breaking or whatever, I've always shied away from expandables. Now, you also have to know like where your miss is, and I tend to shoot very tight to the shoulder. So my miss is going to be tighter to the shoulder than away from it. If you're a type of person that is the opposite of that, then maybe an expandable is right for you, because now we're back on the category of forgiveness, where that giant cutting diameter could help bail you out of a situation if you punch a critter through the guts instead of hitting them in the shoulder. So there's a ton of variability in what you're doing, and ultimately it's like what's right for me might not be right for either of you or anybody else listening. But the kind of my trials through 15 years of doing this now have led me in a certain direction, and that's large cut on contact. 3 is good, but 4 is better. Giant chunks through animals.
Yeah, my experiences with expandables were kind of, it just took a lot of energy to open those. And I think especially, like, still have a pretty long draw length and think I'm 28. And then I'm shooting, between 60 and 65 pounds, kind of depends on the year. But that's still just not as much as some dude with a 30-inch draw length and shooting 70 pounds. Like, you just have more oomph there to be able to punch that expandable through, whereas I don't have as much oomph to try to push it through. So that's, as soon as I had a couple experiences like that, I started going to like a fixed blade or cut on contact and having way, way better luck.
Yeah, and it varies by bow also, right? So I do a ton of bow testing, and last night I was shooting 5 different bows, and the speed ranged from 265, and these are all set up the same, from 265 with my setup to 296. That's insane, right? I mean, 30 feet per second is a lot of distance and a lot of energy and momentum for an arrow to store.
Yeah, the variables are, it's astounding how many there are and how much stuff you gotta think through. And it's hard to make sense of it all. But I think you made a good point earlier, really being picky about your shots and your shot placement, shot distance. That's a great way to reduce those variables. And it's something that it just takes time. I get plenty of flack sometimes for the shots I've taken on camera. And I want to remind everybody, I'm not afraid to say it, I've only killed a dozen or so animals with a bow. I've watched dudes kill 50 of them or more, but personally, I'm at like a dozen. So I'm very early on in this process. I took a super quartering away shot on a nilgai, but when I shot it, I didn't think it was too quartering away. Lo and behold, the arrow went through 18 inches almost of pure stomach before it went into the vitals. The animal only went 75 yards, but that arrow and the setup I had, I feel like helped it, but that arrow had to travel all the way through a very densely, browse packed stomach to get to the vitals and then still do its job of cutting and killing the animal. So in my mind, that simple 2-blade with and it was a single bevel, it allowed it to slice through all that and still get to where it needed to go to get the job done, right? Where if a different broadhead, and maybe even yours, Taylor, it hits all that stomach content, and maybe it can't make it through there because there's just too much resistance, right? And that could be on me to not take that severe quartering away shot next time, if I was using that equipment.
You have to know you and your gear, right? I'm convinced that bow hunting, like part of that high, that awesome feeling that we get, is remaining calm and trying to control yourself while you're having the most insane adrenaline dump possible, right? Like there's a critter there, you're at full draw, it's going to happen, but you might have to wait 10 seconds or 30 seconds or 90 seconds or let down, right? Like that is what we all live for. That's that rush. But you have to know in that moment, and that example for you is a perfect example. There are times where if you're taking a shot on an animal that is hard quartered away, you might have an entrance point that's at that last rib or second to last rib. I mean, it is way back there. And that's the correct shot angle that arrow needs to travel. And depending on the animal, like an elk, I mean, that arrow's got to go another, 30 inches, 40 inches to even get into the diaphragm, get into the chest cavity. So, in that instance, a smaller cutting fixed blade cut on contact head, like a 2-blade could be perfect, but you also don't have to have that animal die in 50 yards.
Yeah.
So I think like part of it is like they say, horses for courses, or you have to have your gear for the job. When I go out west, my gear changes up, right? And that's because I know I have more room to play with, and penetration is key. Here in the suburbs, failure is not an option, and that tends to take the fixed blade heads out for me, the mechanical heads out for me, and puts the fixed blades into play. And then, a critter going down as fast as humanly possible is important. So that's where these large cutting diameters come useful for me. Where, like you said earlier, if a deer goes down 100 yards for you guys, you're like, hell yeah, it's down. I watched it drop. Whereas I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to go pull my street clothes out of my car and get changed, and I'm about to get yelled at by a Karen. So here we go. So success for me is different than success for the average hunter, but I think knowing that equipment and how it's performing is really, really key. And also, early on, I was shooting large mechanicals that were a 2-blade mechanical, so a rear deploying 2-blade mechanical. And what was mind-blowing to me was how much variability you had just depending on what articulation that blade entered at. So if it was totally horizontal, you could get completely different results than totally vertical, because you just have this like cutting slit that goes through there, and you could theoretically, have one that went through vertically and you catch a bunch of goodies and the animal goes down right away. And if it's horizontal or at some weird angle, you just have the potential of not getting, all the good stuff. So when I look at a larger cutting chunk, to me, that's more forgiving than just the slit that goes through.
I think a lot of people would agree with you there too, where anytime you can add an axis of cutting is better than just the one. And I've got the first elk I killed, same thing. It was the perfectest of perfect shots. Both lungs passed through the scapula on the far side. I was like, oh, that thing's it's done, right? I was kicking back with my wife, just saying, hey, let's give it 30 minutes. We'll go and start butchering. Well, 24 hours later, I lost the blood trail over and over again, spent the night in the woods. I'm just doing mercy loops and randomly come upon this beaver pond, and this cow is falling into it. And this is it. I found it, so I can tell you exactly what the arrow did. It was actually interesting because the water had chilled everything down so much that it was a beautiful necropsy. Like everything, the heart and the lungs were in this like perfect state, right? It was just cold, and you could look at it and see what all happened there. But the best I can figure is because there was only one axis on that cut, no bleeders. It was a Magnus Stinger, which I think people consider a good broadhead. But if I was going to shoot it, I would definitely have bleeders, because that single slit going through there, it allowed those lungs to sort of seal that slit and maintain some sort of compression and keep working. And that elk went a mile.
Yeah, I mean, it happens. There's a reason that after World War I, triangle-shaped daggers were outlawed, right, in warfare, and it's because it's very difficult to suture that wound and fix it. That's what I want to shoot. I don't want a something that's repairable. And Mother Nature is great at surviving, and I've seen animals of buddies of mine that have gotten like one lung hits with a 2-blade head, very similar to like what you're talking about, Yanni, that the deer lived. I mean, we shot a doe, 23 and 15, 8 years ago, that had been shot and only had one lung hit. And when we opened her up, her one lung was totally healthy and functional up until about 20 minutes before. Her other lung looked like a raisin. It was black and had shriveled up and was just like a dead lung. And the best guess that we had, now granted, we're all not very intelligent people, was that, that lung basically was dead. It ceased to work in her from that one lung hit. And she still survived though. So it's unbelievable the resiliency that these animals have, and that's why it's important to put a big old chunk through them.
Right.
Yeah. Can I kind of have a two-parter here, but for folks going into like a store looking at some broadheads, when they're looking at a pack of broadheads, can you tell them the difference between like a double bevel and a single bevel, and then a chisel tip versus like a cut-on contact? Like, what does that look like?
Absolutely, yeah. So, a single bevel is just going to have the cutting kind of blade, the shave part on one side. The other side will be flat or sharpened, I guess would be a good way to put it. And the theory is that will core through as it's cutting. It will help kind of continue that spiraling for deeper penetration. I've never had an issue with penetration, so I can't really speak to like, hey, this arrow is buried deeper in the dirt than the other ones that I've shot through it. So I have not seen really any difference between the two of those. And then you said a cut on contact head versus a chisel tip.
Yep.
So, cut on contact head is just going to look kind of like the point of a dart, not sharpened, whereas a chisel tip will have some sort of like sharp angles or sharpened structure to them to help kind of punch through or cut whatever it's potentially hitting. And now I have had phenomenal success with chisel tip type heads, or something that gradually like starts at a very fine point and then goes up into a more gentle angle to where that can help punch through something. I think that's a very important feature for a head to have.
Well, hold on. I thought the head you're shooting now is cut on contact, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's kind of a hybrid. It has the one that I'm shooting now is cut on contact with a little bit of like a fine point. The head that I shot prior to that one, kind of a hybrid too, but came down to like a super fine point with a gentle ramping up to it. And I've had that punch through like stuff that it should not punch through. So that's always kind of fun to see. Well, I don't know if that's fun, actually. It means you didn't put the best shot on an animal if it blows through something. But
would a good example of a chisel tip be like a slick trick?
Yeah, I would put a slick trick in the chisel tip category, even though it's kind of like gentle. I think the fact that it has the 4 heads that are coming down to a very fine point is what really helps that head penetrate through. And there are a couple of different variations of that head. So generally in a head, I want gradual cutting. I do not want something that just instantly fans out on like, a steep angle, because if you think about that head going through tissue or bone or whatever it's penetrating through, you want it to gradually cut as opposed to just instantly go from, oh, I'm flying, now I'm cutting. That is taking away from that kinetic energy and momentum that is propelling the arrow through the air.
Got it.
So you're saying heads that would end up being too shallow of an angle, or and I'm guessing that's mostly mechanicals, right? They become almost too flat, too fast. That's what you're saying you don't like?
Yeah. So one thing that I really had some of the worst success with were over the top opening expandables. So you have 2 ways for an expandable broadhead to deploy. There's rear opening. So if you guys are thinking of a broadhead looking down from top to bottom, that the blades are going to slide back into their open position and cut. So they're instantly cutting using the tissue to open. Whereas a over the top head, if you put your hands together and then open your hands outwardly, that's how an over the top head is designed to work. For me, I think there are a lot of potential issues with that type of system deploying, because you're taking a ton of energy and momentum to open a head that way. Also, you're having a very small entry hole. And for me, I want giant holes everywhere that they are able to be. So to have an over-the-top opening head, to me, robs a lot of energy and momentum, and then also is not allowing a large hole until the exit side.
Interesting.
O'Reilly Auto Parts are in the business of keeping your car on the road. O'Reilly Auto Parts offer friendly, helpful service and the parts knowledge you need for all your maintenance and repairs. If you're confused about what part you need, like what wipers are going to be the best, what replacement headlights are going to be the best, go into O'Reilly and talk to the people that work there because they're great and they're super friendly and they'll get you squared away where you walk out knowing you got the right thing. They've got thousands of parts and accessories in stock, either in-store or online, so you never have to worry if you're in a jam. Do you need your windshield wipers replaced? You need a brake light fixed? You need some quick service? They'll help you find the right part or point you to the nearest local repair shop for help. The professional parts people at O'Reilly Auto Parts are your one-stop shop for all things auto do-it-yourself, and you can find what you need in-store or online. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today or visit us at O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. That's O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land. Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild, but searching for property can be a maze. That's where Land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to Land.com today to turn one day into today, because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth.
Bones, what works? What in your experience? Rip through the categories and let's just say ribs, because I'm sure you've seen plenty of scapulas get hit too. But let's just say with ribs, have you ever had anything fail just on a rib?
I've never had anything fail just on a whitetail rib. I have seen where people have had issues on elk ribs. Mm-hmm. I'm not the most experienced elk hunter, considering the fact that I'm more pear-shaped than not. So the elk mountains and I don't really get along. But for whitetail, I've never had a rib get in the way of anything. I mean, I've smashed ribs, no problem. Now, I would think just generally when it comes to bone, though, on our spectrum that we've talked about earlier, where, you know, small is on one side, large is on the other, the smaller the head, the better job it's going to do to penetrate. There's less stuff catching it there. It's easier to kind of maul through tissue, as opposed to a larger head where there might not be anything behind the blade kind of helping it push through. I do think that brings up an interesting kind of point, though, where on some heads that are designed like a fixed blade, or, you know, some of the fixed blades that don't have a truss system on the blade. So if it does encounter some resistance, it might break away to where that will rob some energy, but what's left is able to still penetrate down into an animal and keep doing its job. There was a head that I used to shoot and shot a ton of deer with that was a fixed blade head that looked like a mechanical, where the blades were already kind of deployed. And I had many instances where that head would penetrate far beyond anything else, because if it encountered anything, it would just kind of bend out of the way. So reliability or durability, rather, not the best on that head, but as far as doing its job, it was awesome. And the core of that head was great. The downside of that head, the reason I ended up stopped shooting it, it was too big. So you run into issues where like these broadheads are a problem to fit in your quiver, or you potentially have like bow shelf issues where if that head is a certain way, it might catch the riser on your shelf. And for me, I do not want to put in the time and effort or have the potential for failure pop up in the tree when I'm like spun around like a 240-pound pretzel and I'm getting ready to execute a shot. I don't want, the arrow to fly weird and all of a sudden you're like, what happened? And, you realize that the arrow caught the shelf of your bow or there was something that created a potential issue in your shot.
Yeah, man. I've got an anecdote for that one. My brother-in-law and I were hunting, I think it was 2 falls ago, and first evening out, he gets a shot. It's a little bit on the long side, which is why I thought he had made the mistake initially. It was 50 plus, and I see the bull run off with the arrow stuck. I mean, it looked like he was aiming for the jugular, just like high neck. And I'm like, what in the world? Like, how? Like, I know that was a little bit of a poke, might have been excited, but I mean, you're like 3 or 4 feet away from where you were supposedly aiming, right? Well, we didn't find that bull, but it was a week or 2 later when he's reevaluating. He didn't even want to hunt forever. He just set the bow down and he was so upset about the whole thing. But it wasn't until a week or 2 later we're shooting and he's drawing back, and I'm like, we got to shoot the broadheads. Like, no more field tips. We got to figure out what happened. And sure enough, one of those blades was just long enough, and I always put felt down on, or moleskin, whatever you want, on the shelf, right? So to minimize any kind of noise. Well, you could see that one tip of one of those broadhead blades was just catching it enough. And sure enough, at 20 yards, he shoots, missed the target. So at 50, it was very easy to see how he could be off by 3 or 4 feet, But
and he's probably shooting his field tips and hitting, inside out bullseyes, going like, totally. I'm ready, let's go.
Yep.
Yeah, you have to practice with the gear that you're going out in the woods and using, because otherwise you don't know that problem exists until it's, too late.
Yeah.
Are you looking at material construction and stuff too on your broadheads? What they're made out of?
To some extent, although, not as much as I probably should be, in the sense that all of the heads that I'm shooting and having success with, they're not made of lesser material. Early on, I had an issue with a certain expandable head that was made out of an aluminum ferrule. And that was a absolute disaster because the aluminum was crumpling like a can, right? So you can't have that. So, but I don't know enough about like the hardness of steel, whether it's like 440 or, 480 or whatever. I like that. That's Latin to me. I know that when I have a head that is, made out of quality material, it's performing flawlessly.
What's the most you think deer you've ever shot with the same head? Resharpening, shooting a deer, resharpening, shooting a head. Like, what's been your longest lasting head?
I counted that last year. I had 12 deer that I shot with the same head. And it, unfortunately, the head expired when it passed through and smashed into a quartz rock and looked like kind of like concave. It was very smashed. And that head performed flawlessly. And that was actually what won me over to shooting the head that I'm currently shooting now compared to what I had shot for years prior to that.
Can you tell us what that head was?
Yeah, so the head that I'm shooting now is the Method Archery. It's called the VBS. So it's an inch and a quarter by inch and an eighth head, and I actually have that exact head sitting down here on my 2 sharpened pile. But it's dead. It cannot be brought back. But it went through a pile of critters, and I was like, you know what? This has won me over. It's a phenomenal head. The prior to that, the head that I shot a ton was a 4-blade head that is readily available, and I just think the world of. And I've seen it perform in situations that it shouldn't have, and really just a phenomenal head that works for everyone.
Which head
Can you
was
tell us
that?
which one that was?
It's the Slick Trick Grizz Trick 2. So the Grizz Trick for me, I like the blade angle of it better. So the Grizz Trick is a 1.25 inch by 1.25 inch head, but the blades are further back on that ferrule as opposed to the Slick Trick mags. So the Slick Trick Magnum ends up with a little steeper cutting diameter or angle because it's like tip and then instantly blade. Whereas that Grizz Trick, there's a little more of the actual broadhead ferrule before it gets into the blade. And those heads are phenomenal. The only downside to a Slick Trick head is that there's a washer on it. And for some reason, that washer you would think is square on both sides, but you have to spin those heads. And if they don't spin true, you need to flip the washer over and then they will spin. So I just spin them on my finger. Like anytime I get to deer camp or when I assemble a head, I just, I'm sure you guys know how to do this. You just spin the arrow kind of like a top on your finger, and you can feel if it's spinning appropriately or not. If you feel any wobble on that head, you need to stop and flip that washer around. That was the only downside to those heads, is that there's a little bit of potential for imperfection just because of that washer. But the system, the way they work together for resharpening them, they're an absolute dream. Dream head. The method head that I'm shooting now has a little bit of a swept angle to the blades. And I think that really helps with the cutting, and it's more of like a gradual slice just at rapid speed as it's entering an animal. I shot a doe recently that took a step right when my shot was breaking. So as I'm applying tension to the release, shot breaks and it hit her. My initial reaction was, oh no. It was back. She was broadside, maybe like 1 degree quartered away. She ran about 10 steps, looked back, and fell over dead. Better to be lucky than good. I definitely caught some goodies there, right on the backside of the lung, but I have not seen an animal this.
You must have opened it up. What did you catch to get that? Those results.
I got the back of her lungs. I think that her lungs, people don't realize that, just like our body, when we have air in our lungs are expanded. I think her lungs had expanded out, and I actually caught the back triangle, if you will, of her lungs. It was a perfect double lung shot, but visually it looked like guts. I mean, it looked like liver if I was lucky. So I just happened to get lucky with her, but that's the type of forgiveness that I want. And I feel like by shooting a large 4-blade head, I'm getting forgiveness on both ends of the spectrum. If I hit back, like in that instance, I'm able to hopefully catch some goodies and put a deer down quickly. Also have large holes to where they're not clogging up, or they're less likely to clog up, and they're easier to follow the trails of. If I hit forward, I know that I have personally enough energy and momentum to punch through pretty much anything that it's hitting. I mean, unless I hit the absolute knuckle of a shoulder, which some bullets aren't getting through, then I'm probably okay.
A lot of info. I don't know if I have it, if I'm any clearer now in my head about what I think about broadheads before we started, but I'm gonna personally have to re-listen to this podcast and what you talked about.
So here's how I would sum it up. If you're shooting a tuned bow and you're hunting whitetail, shots inside 40 yards, it's hard to go wrong with a fixed head. If you are shooting less poundage, where a fixed head might be detrimental for expansion or whatever, I mean, it's hard to go wrong with a fixed head. Fixed head in the right spot's going to do its job. And if you're hunting out west where recovery can be a little longer, maybe a slightly smaller fixed head, but never is a large cutting diameter broadhead a bad thing.
Yeah, I feel like everybody should start with a fixed blade. And then maybe, like, depending on the situation and your setup, you could graduate into trying like an expandable, but I don't think people should just go to an expandable just for ease of not having to tune your bow or something. They should just do it right and try a fixed blade.
I totally agree. A fixed blade with bleeders on it. You want you want to cut a chunk, not a slit. And then, if you are experiencing issues from there, start to address those issues. So if you notice that the head that you're shooting is loud in flight, like if you start noticing that you're shooting animals and they're like ducking bad, they're hearing it, you're hearing a whistle, address that issue. Odds are you're not going to have much of an issue. Like if that's happening, your broadhead itself is catching a lot of air in flight, and we're talking like minor changes that happen from a solid blade to a vented head. So start with a fixed blade and address potential problems from there, but you can't go wrong with a fixed blade.
Yeah.
Now, and again, you're just going to have to take the responsibility to tune your bow to get your system dialed, because I think that's one of the main things you'll hear, and we'll get it in the comments, is going to be, yeah, but those things are so hard to tune.
They're not, though. So, I mean, here, for anyone that's shooting, the first thing you need to check is your form. Is your draw length the correct length? Like, I see these people all the time that are overbowed, their draw length, their hands back behind their head. That's just, it's bad. That's like trying to play golf with clubs that Tiger Woods is going to use. You need to get the bow correct for you, get the draw weight to where you can shoot it, shoot a lot, get your grip consistent, and all you do is you shoot a field point and you shoot a broadhead and you move your rest a little bit and you're there. Like this is not extreme science. You do not have to take it to the level that I do where I'm like moving strands on my string around because I'm weird and OCD about it, and I literally can't shoot it if I don't feel like I put that level of detail into it. I mean, there are tons of resources online for very simple bow tuning 101, and just get your stuff hitting in the right spot. Do not just move your bow sight to where a broadhead's hitting and try to go hunt. Please don't do that. Do a little level of tuning and you will be very happy with the results.
More confident in your system too, for sure.
Absolutely. And if like we all know that Murphy follows you into the backcountry and the second that you're in the backcountry and something goes wrong, you're going to have the knowledge and the confidence to work on your gear and know what happened. You're not going to have to burn a day driving into town to the local bow shop that's probably slammed to figure out what happened to your bow. Like you're burning a day of vacation to hunt. Don't spend it at the bow shop. You can fix your bow right there in the backcountry and be ready to go.
Yep, absolutely. So we're going to close this thing out with a listener question from Lee_Lands on Instagram. He says he's having issues with making holes with little or no blood trail. He says, how and why, and is it too sharp? Never too sharp.
Test it on your finger if you think it's too sharp. How many times have you guys cut yourself when you're doing something with a sharp blade and you look at it for a second and you're like, oh, I hope it doesn't bleed, and then the blood starts trickling out, right? And you're like, no, and then you super glue it back together.
I'll add to that real quick. The sharp cuts, same way on your own finger. If you cut yourself with an extremely sharp knife or a razor blade, it takes forever to stop bleeding. The duller that knife is, or in this case, the duller your broadhead is, the easier it is for that wound to close back up and to coagulate. It's science. You can't dispute that. So yeah, you can't be too sharp. Shoot sharp.
Yeah. Now, so I have shot, hundreds and hundreds of deer with the same head, and have seen blood trails where one, you walk and you're like, man, Stevie Wonder could follow this blood trail. Like I could video this and send it to Slick Trick. They're going to use it on every promotional content ever, or whatever head you're shooting, right? And I've shot deer with the same head and been like, where the hell is the blood trail? You know, and you're like, I know the deer was right here. I can look at the footage and see it was standing in front of this tree, and there's not a drop of blood. The reason for that is shot placement. So depending on where you hit that animal, if you shoot an animal, and even if you're shooting from an elevated position, but based on the topography, that critter is almost level with you, or that arrow is entering and exiting almost level, and you get high lungs, it takes a while for that blood to fill up before it's spraying out. And anybody who's shot a deer like that, I mean, I know I have, I think you guys might have, like, you're like looking all over, and then you find blood, and then you find a ton of blood because it's finally there and it's blowing out. That's why a deer that's hit in the heart will blow blood everywhere, because it's instant blood. It's pumping out. Same with like a femoral artery hit. So the only reason that you will have poor blood trails are mainly it's shot placement. Now, if you hit a deer low and you get one hole, or maybe you're using an over-the-top expandable, so your entry hole is little and your exit hole potentially gets clogged with, you know, like a chunk of liver or whatever, that obviously will impact your blood trail. But generally, lower in the lungs is hard to beat. You're going to have spray everywhere and a fantastic trail. A lot of gut shot or single, like shoulder hit deer, or any animal for that matter, will end up clogging up, and you're basically doing the Hail Mary circles from there, trying to desperately find that animal.
Nice. Anything else, Yanni?
So your answer to Lee is make better shot placement.
Pay more attention to your shot placement. Get that a little lower in that lower third of the animal. So I want the arrow to exit through my little, soccer ball, my kid's soccer ball, in that lower third of an animal. That's vital to catching what I want to catch and having it go through to where that blood trail is instant, and it's very frothy and short, hopefully.
Yeah. No, I don't have anything else. Taylor, is there anything we missed that you want to add about broadheads on deer at close range and making them not go far at all?
No, I'm sorry to take you down the rabbit hole. I can talk about this for days. I've definitely have a little bit of experience in it. So if anybody has any questions, let you guys know, and I'm happy to help in any way you can. Ultimately, trust your gear.
Tell everybody where they can find. We know we have the Hang and Hunt podcast, and tell everybody like where they can find you on the internet or Instagram.
Yep, Instagram is Urban Bowman, and most of the hunts that I do end up on YouTube under Hunt Urban. So check them out. Lots of different broadheads being put in the air at critters on there for sure.
All right. Well, thanks, Taylor. For everybody listening, you can send your questions, things you want to hear, or specific questions to us at geartalk@themeateater.com. And then if you go to the website, themeateater.com, locate the podcast tab, find Gear Talk. On each individual episode, you can comment specifically on there. And or you can get a hold of us on Instagram at Jordan.Bud is mine, and Giannis _Patelis, pretty sure it's an underscore.
Gosh, I was just thinking I can't even remember myself now.
And shoot us a DM directly, and we'll address it. So cool. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
You ever get that feeling the walls closing in, the concrete jungle suffocating you? You crave some wide open spaces, the chance to connect with nature, maybe in a spot all your own. Well, head over to land.com. They've got ranches, forests, mountains, streams, you name it. Search by acreage. You can search by location. You can search by the kind of hunting and fishing you're dreaming of. Land.com. It is where the adventure begins.